The signal came at 3 in the morning. Kim Yuna sat alone in the monitoring station. The room was dark, except for the blue glow of her screens. She was tired. Her coffee had gone cold hours ago. The night shift was always quiet, and she had started to believe that nothing interesting ever happened during these hours. Then her computer made a sound she had never heard before. Yuna sat up straight. Her heart began to beat faster. The sound meant that something was coming from deep space. Something that was not natural. Something that was sent by someone. She put on her headphones and listened. At first, there was only static. But then, through the noise, she heard it. A voice. It was not human. The words were strange and broken. But there was something in that voice that Yuna understood without needing translation. Fear. Desperation. A cry for help. Yuna worked quickly. Her fingers moved across the keyboard as she tried to clean up the signal. She ran it through the translation software that Earth had developed for situations exactly like this. The program struggled at first. The language was completely unknown. But slowly, word by word, it began to make sense. Please. Anyone who can hear. We are dying. They are killing us. We have no weapons. We cannot fight, please. If there is anyone, help us. The message repeated. Over and over. The same words. The same desperate voice. Yuna felt her throat tighten. She had trained for years to do this job. She had always dreamed of being the one to make first contact with alien life. But she had imagined something different. She had imagined a friendly greeting. A message of peace. Not this. She saved the recording and immediately called her supervisor. Within an hour, the monitoring station was no longer quiet. Officers filled the room. Generals spoke in hushed voices. Scientists argued about the origin of the signal. Yuna stood in the corner and watched as the world she knew began to change. By morning, the message had reached the highest levels of Earth's government. The United Stellar Command called an emergency meeting. Leaders from every human colony joined through secure video links. The room was tense. Everyone had heard the recording. Everyone had the same question. What do we do? Admiral Park Do-hyun was the first to speak. He was an old man with a weathered face and gray hair cut short. He had fought in the colony wars 30 years ago. He had seen death and destruction. But when he listened to that signal, something stirred inside him that he had not felt in a long time. We know who sent this message, he said. His voice was calm but firm. Our scientists have traced the signal to a system called Velha. The species that lives there calls themselves the Volhari. They are scholars, teachers, healers. They have no military, no weapons. They have spent their entire history learning and sharing knowledge. He paused and looked around the room. They are being attacked by an empire called the Dominion. We do not know much about the Dominion. We know they are powerful. We know they are cruel. And we know that if we do nothing, the Volhari will be gone within a month. The room was silent. A politician from the European Federation raised his hand. With respect, Admiral, this is not our fight. We have never met these Volhari. We have never even heard of them until today. Why should we risk our people for strangers? Admiral Park nodded slowly. He had expected this question. You're right, he said. We have never met them. We owe them nothing. If we stay here and do nothing, no one will blame us. The galaxy does not even know we exist. We could remain safe, hidden, comfortable. He walked to the center of the room where a hologram showed the Volhari homeworld. It was a beautiful planet. Blue oceans, green forests, cities that glowed with soft light. But I ask you to think about something, the Admiral continued. For 10,000 years, humanity looked up at the stars and wondered if we were alone. We sent messages into the void. We searched for any sign of other life. We wanted to know that someone else was out there. He pointed at the hologram. Now someone is out there, and they are crying for help. They sent their message into the darkness, hoping that someone would hear, hoping that someone would care. Admiral Park turned to face the council directly. What kind of species would we be if we heard that cry and did nothing? What would it say about humanity if we turned away from people who needed us just because we did not know them? The room remained silent. But Yuna, watching from her seat near the door, saw something change in the faces of the council members. The fear was still there. The doubt. But now there was something else too. Shame. The vote was held that afternoon. It was not unanimous. Some still argued that the risk was too great. But in the end, the decision was made. Earth would answer the call. As Yuna walked out of the building that evening, she looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, far beyond the stars she could see, a dying species was waiting. They did not know that help was coming. They did not know that a small blue planet had heard their cry, but it had. And Earth was about to show the galaxy what humanity was made of. The order went out to every corner of human space. On Mars, FACTORY workers stopped their machines and listened to the announcement. On the moon bases, engineers put down their tools. On the distant colonies of Titan and Europa, families gathered around screens to hear the news. Earth was going to war. Not for land. Not for resources. Not for power. Earth was going to war to save people it had never met. Within hours, the mobilization began. It was the largest military operation in human history. Ships that had been sitting in docks for years were pulled out and repaired. Weapons that had been stored away were brought back into the light. Soldiers who had retired long ago received calls asking them to serve one more time. And they said yes. Almost all of them said yes. Captain Lee Jiwoo received her orders while eating dinner in her small apartment on Earth. She read the message 3 times to make sure she understood. She was being given command of the Vanguard fleet. She would lead the first wave of ships in the battle. Jiwoo was 38 years old. She had served in the military for 16 years. She was known for being calm and careful. She never rushed into decisions. She thought about every problem from every angle before she acted. Some people called her cold, but the soldiers who served under her knew the truth. She was not cold. She simply cared too much to make mistakes. She finished her dinner, washed her dishes, and packed a small bag. Then she took a shuttle to the orbital station where her ship waited. The battlecruiser Taegak was one of the most advanced ships in the human fleet. It was 300 meters long with weapons that could tear through armor like paper. Jiwoo had commanded this ship for 5 years. She knew every corner of it. She knew every member of her crew. Commander Choi Minho was waiting for her when she arrived. Minho was her second in command. He was the opposite of Jiwoo in almost every way. Where she was calm, he was passionate. Where she was patient, he was restless. He spoke too loudly and laughed too often, and always seemed to be moving, even when standing still. But Jiwoo trusted him with her life. "Captain," Minho said with a grin. "Ready to go save some aliens?" Jiwoo did not smile. "Are the crew ready?" "They have been ready since the moment they heard this signal. Everyone wants to be part of this." Jiwoo nodded. She walked through the ship and saw what Minho meant. The crew members were working with a focus she had never seen before. There was no fear in their eyes. No hesitation. They understood what they were about to do, and they were proud to do it. On the ground, Sergeant Beak Hannah was preparing her unit for something different. While the fleet would fight in space, her soldiers would fight on the surface. They would be the ones to land on the planet and protect the survivors. Hannah was 42 years old. She had been a soldier since she was 18. She had scars on her arms and back from battles she did not like to talk about. Her hair was gray at the temples, and her hands were rough from years of holding weapons. But when she looked at her soldiers, her eyes were soft. "Listen to me," she said to her unit. They stood in formation before her, young men and women who had never seen real combat. "This is not going to be easy. The enemy is strong. The enemy is cruel. Some of us might not come back." She paused and looked at each face. "But we are not going there to conquer. We are not going there to take. We are going there to protect. There are millions of people on that planet who have never held a weapon. Children who have never known war. They are counting on us. And we will not let them down." The soldiers straightened. Their fear did not disappear. But something else appeared alongside it. Purpose. 3 days later, the Armada was ready. 347 ships gathered at the edge of the solar system. Destroyers and cruisers and carriers and battleships. The flagship, Soul's Pride, floated at the center of the formation. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the flagship and looked out at the fleet. He had never seen anything like it. Ships from every colony. Soldiers from every nation. All of them united for a single purpose. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. "Today we begin a journey that will change humanity forever," he said. "When we arrive at our destination, the galaxy will see us for the first time. They will learn who we are and what we believe." He took a breath. "We believe that no one should suffer alone. We believe that the strong should protect the weak. We believe that when someone cries for help, the right thing to do is answer." He looked out at the stars ahead. "The Dominion thinks they can destroy an innocent species and no one will care. They think the universe is cold and cruel, and that power is the only thing that matters. Today, we prove them wrong." The Admiral gave the final order. "All ships, engage warp drives. We have people to save." One by one, the ships jumped into faster-than-light travel. The stars stretched into lines of light. The Armada vanished from human space and raced toward a battle that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. On the Taiguk, Captain Jiwoo watched the stars blur past her window. In 3 weeks, they would arrive at Velar Prime. In 3 weeks, they would face an enemy they had never seen. She did not know if they would win. She did not know how many of her crew would survive, but she knew they were doing the right thing. And sometimes, that was enough. The Armada came out of warp and found a world on fire. Captain Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the Taiguk and stared at the view screen. Her face showed no emotion, but her hands gripped the railing so hard, her knuckles turned white. Velar Prime was beautiful once. She could see that even now. The planet had blue oceans and green continents and cities that rose like crystals from the ground. But those cities were burning. Smoke covered entire regions. Orbital stations that once floated peacefully now tumbled through space in broken pieces. How many survivors? She asked quietly. Lieutenant Yoon Tai-woo checked his instruments. He was young, only 25, but he was one of the best pilots in the fleet. Sensors show millions of life signs concentrated in underground bunkers. They are hiding. And the enemy? Tai-woo's face darkened. 187 Dominion warships. They are turning toward us now. The Dominion fleet was larger than anyone had expected. Their ships were massive, built for destruction. Each one was covered in weapons and armor. They moved with the confidence of an empire that had never been defeated. A message came through the communication system. The voice was deep and cruel. "Unknown vessels, you have entered Dominion space. Leave now or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning." Jiwoo looked at Commander Minho. He was grinning, but there was no humor in his eyes. Only determination. "Captain," he said, "what are your orders?" Jiwoo pressed the communication button. All ships, this is the Taeguk. Form attack pattern. Prepare for battle. She did not respond to the Dominion warning. There was nothing to say. Admiral Park's voice came through from the flagship. All commanders, remember why we are here. Fight hard. Fight smart. And bring our people home. The two fleets closed the distance between them. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the Dominion fired. The space between the fleets lit up with weapons fire. Beams of energy shot across the darkness. Missiles streaked toward their targets. The human ships scattered and returned fire. The Battle of Velar Prime had begun. Jiwoo commanded her ship with precision. She called out orders quickly and clearly. Her crew responded without hesitation. The Taeguk moved through the chaos like a dancer, avoiding enemy fire while hitting back with its own weapons. But the Dominion ships were powerful. Their armor was thick. Their weapons hit hard. One by one, human ships began to fall. The destroyer Incheon took a direct hit to its engine. It exploded in a ball of fire. The cruiser Daegu lost power and drifted helplessly until enemy ships tore it apart. On the bridge of the Taeguk, Jiwoo watched her people die and forced herself to keep fighting. Then something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Taiwoo had an idea. A crazy idea that only a young pilot who did not know fear could think of. "Captain," he said, "the Dominion flagship has a weakness. Their hangar bay doors are open. If I can lead a squadron inside, we can destroy them from within." Jiwoo looked at him. "That is suicide." "Maybe," Taiwoo admitted. "But if we do not do something, we lose this battle." Jiwoo was silent for a long moment. She wanted to say no. She wanted to protect this young man who had his whole life ahead of him. But she knew he was right. "Go," she said, "and come back alive." Taiwoo smiled. "I will try." He ran to the hangar and climbed into his fighter. 11 other pilots joined him. They launched from the Taeguk and flew straight toward the Dominion flagship. The enemy tried to stop them. Fighters came to intercept. Weapons fire filled the space around them. Taiwoo lost 3 of his pilots before they reached the flagship. But he did not stop. His fighter shot through the hangar bay doors and into the ship itself. The inside was huge, filled with enemy craft and soldiers. Taiwoo did not hesitate. He fired everything he had at the exposed systems and fuel lines. The explosion started small. Then it grew. Taiwoo flew out of the hangar just as the flagship's core ignited. The massive ship broke apart, fire spilling from every crack. It was the largest vessel in the Dominion fleet, and now it was gone. The Dominion forces hesitated. For the first time in the battle, they seemed uncertain. Commander Minho saw his chance. His ship, the destroyer Sejong, had taken heavy damage. Half its weapons were gone. Its engines were failing, but it could still move. "Minho, what are you doing?" Jiwoo's voice came through his communicator. "Buying time," he answered. He aimed his crippled ship at the largest remaining Dominion cruiser and pushed the engines to full power. The Sejong accelerated toward the enemy vessel. "Minho, no!" But it was too late. The destroyer crashed into the cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded together, destroying 2 more enemy vessels in the blast. The Dominion fleet, already shaken by the loss of their flagship, began to fall apart. Their attacks became uncoordinated. Their formations broke. Admiral Park gave the order. "All ships, press the attack." The human fleet surged forward. Despite being smaller, despite being outgunned, they fought with a fury the Dominion had never seen. They took risks that no other species would take. They sacrificed themselves for each other without hesitation. And slowly, impossibly, the Dominion began to retreat. Their remaining ships turned and fled into warp. They left behind dozens of destroyed vessels and the planet they had tried to conquer. When the last enemy ship disappeared, the human fleet fell silent. 47 ships had been lost. Thousands of soldiers had died, but they had won. Jiwoo sat in her command chair and finally let herself breathe. Around her, her crew was cheering. Some were crying. They had done something that no one thought possible. On the surface below, the Valhari survivors emerged from their bunkers. They looked up at the sky and saw human dropships descending through the smoke. Not to attack, not to conquer, to help. The Battle of Velhar Prime was over, and humanity had announced itself to the galaxy. The dropship landed in what used to be a city square. Sergeant Beak Hannah was the first one out. She stepped onto the ground and looked around at the destruction. Buildings that had once been tall and beautiful were now nothing but broken walls and piles of stone. Smoke rose from fires that had been burning for days. The air smelled like ash and death. Her soldiers followed her, weapons ready. But there was no one to fight. The Dominion was gone. Spread out, Hannah ordered. Find survivors. Be gentle. These people have been through enough. Her unit moved through the ruins carefully. They found bodies. Too many bodies. The Valhari were small creatures, about the size of human children, with soft gray skin and large dark eyes. In life, they had probably been gentle and curious. In death, they looked broken. Hannah had seen death before. She had caused death before. But this was different. These were not soldiers. These were teachers and healers and artists. They had never held weapons. They had never hurt anyone, and they had been killed anyway. She found the child hiding in what remained of a library. The building had mostly collapsed, but one corner still stood. Shelves of strange tablets lined the walls. In the middle of the rubble, a small Valhari child sat alone. It was holding a damaged tablet to its chest like a treasure. Hannah approached slowly. She put down her weapon and held up her hands to show she meant no harm. "It is okay," she said softly. "I am here to help." The child looked at her with those large, dark eyes. It did not run. It did not scream. It simply asked a question in a quiet voice that the translator turned into human words. "Why did you come?" Hannah knelt down so she was at the child's level. She thought about the question. She thought about all the reasons she could give. Orders from command. Duty to her country. The promise of honor and glory. But none of those felt true. "Because you asked," she said finally. "You called for help. We heard you. So we came." The child stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly it moved closer and took her hand. Hannah felt tears in her eyes. She was a soldier. She had trained herself not to cry. But holding this small hand in the middle of so much death, she could not stop herself. She picked up the child and carried it to safety, on the flagship Soul's Pride. Admiral Park met with the Valhari Elder Council. They had survived in the deepest bunker, protected by layers of rock and ancient construction. There were 12 of them, old and tired and filled with sorrow. Elder Kieran was their leader. He had white fur and eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. When he spoke, his voice was calm but heavy with confusion. "We do not understand," he said. "You came from beyond the stars. You lost ships and soldiers. Many of your people died. Why did you do this for us? We cannot pay you. We have nothing to offer." Admiral Park sat across from him. The admiral looked tired too. He had not slept since the battle ended. He had spent hours reading the names of every soldier who had died. "We do not come for payment," Park said. "Then, what do you want? Territory? Resources? Our knowledge?" "No," Kieran leaned forward. "Then why? In our experience of the galaxy, no species acts without expecting something in return. Power is the only truth. Strength is the only law. Why would you sacrifice so much for strangers?" Admiral Park was quiet for a moment. He thought about how to explain something that seemed so obvious to him but so impossible to the Velhari. On our world, he said finally, we have a belief. We believe that helping those in need is its own reward. We believe that the measure of a species is not how they treat the powerful, but how they treat the helpless. He looked at the elders. You were helpless. You needed someone to stand between you and destruction. We could be that someone. So we chose to be. The elders looked at each other. They had no words for what they were hearing. In their entire history, in all their contact with other species, they had never met anyone like these humans. You are strange creatures, Kareen said at last. But perhaps the galaxy needs strange creatures like you. In the medical bay of the Taiguk, Captain Jiwoo sat beside Commander Minho's bed. He was alive. Barely. The escape pod had launched just before his ship crashed into the Dominion cruiser. The explosion had thrown the pod far into space. It had taken rescue teams hours to find him. By the time they did, his heart had stopped twice, but he was still breathing. The doctor said he would recover, though it would take months. Minho opened his eyes slowly. He saw Jiwoo and tried to smile. Did we win? He asked. His voice was weak. We won, Jiwoo said. Good. He closed his eyes again. I always wanted to go out with a bang. Jiwoo did not laugh. She wanted to yell at him. She wanted to tell him he was reckless and stupid, and that he had almost died. But instead, she just took his hand. Do not ever do that again, she said quietly. Minho squeezed her hand weakly. I cannot promise that. Back on Earth, the news of the battle spread across every screen and every speaker. People gathered in the streets to hear the reports. 47 ships lost, 6,000 soldiers dead, and one innocent species saved. There was mourning. Families who lost sons and daughters and mothers and fathers wept together. Memorials were already being planned. Statues would be built. Names would be carved in stone. But there was also something else. A feeling that spread through humanity like fire. Pride. They had proven something about themselves. Something they had always hoped was true, but had never been sure of. They had shown that when the moment came, when it truly mattered, humanity would choose to help rather than look away. Kim Yuna stood on the roof of the monitoring station and watched the sun set. She thought about the signal she had received that night. The desperate voice crying out for help. Someone had heard. Someone had answered. And millions of lives had been saved. Because one species decided that strangers were worth fighting. 4. The cost had been high. But some things were worth any price. The story spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In taverns on distant worlds, travelers whispered about it. In the halls of great empires, leaders discussed it in secret meetings. In the homes of ordinary beings on 1,000 different planets, families gathered to hear the tale. A new species had appeared. They called themselves humans. They came from a small blue planet in an unremarkable corner of the Milky Way. They had heard a distress call from a species they had never met. And they had sent an armada to save them. No one could believe it. The Galactic Council, a gathering of the oldest and most powerful civilizations, called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species filled the Great Hall, their voices mixing in 100 different languages. This is impossible, said the ambassador from the Kreth Empire. No species sacrifices its own people for strangers. It must be a trick. They must want something. Perhaps they want allies, suggested the delegate from the Orion Collective. Perhaps they are building influence. Or perhaps, said a quiet voice from the back of the hall, they simply did what was right. Everyone turned to look. Elder Kieran stood at the entrance, supported by 2 younger Velhari. He had traveled across the stars to deliver a message to the galaxy. I have met these humans. Kieran said. He walked slowly to the center of the hall. I asked their admiral the same question you are asking now. What do they want? What do they expect in return? He paused and looked at the assembly. He told me they wanted nothing. He told me that helping the helpless is its own reward. I did not believe him at first. Like you, I thought it must be a trick. But I watched them. I watched them rebuild our cities. I watched them care for our wounded. I watched them weep for our dead, as if they were their own. Kieran's voice grew stronger. These humans are something the galaxy has never seen before. They are fierce in battle, but gentle in peace. They fight without mercy, but help without conditions. They are dangerous and kind in equal measure. He turned to face the council directly. You may fear them. You may distrust them. But I tell you this, the galaxy is better with them in it. The council fell into debate. Some species saw the humans as a threat. Others saw them as potential partners. A few saw them as nothing more than a curiosity that would soon fade. But one empire did not see them any of those ways. The Dominion saw them as prey that needed to be destroyed. In the dark throne room of the Dominion capital, Overlord Voss sat in silence. He had received the reports from Velar Prime. He had watched the recordings of the battle. He had seen his fleet, the pride of the Dominion, broken by ships that were smaller and less advanced. It was not the defeat that bothered him. The Dominion had lost battles before. What bothered him was how they had lost. The humans had not fought like other species. They had not been careful or calculating. They had been wild, unpredictable. They had thrown themselves into danger without hesitation. They had sacrificed their own lives to save their comrades. Such beings were dangerous. Such beings could not be allowed to spread. Prepare the war fleet, Voss commanded. His voice echoed through the empty chamber. We will crush these humans before they become a true threat. We will destroy their home world and salt the ground so nothing grows again. His generals bowed and left to carry out his orders. The Dominion was coming for Earth, but Admiral Park already knew. Intelligence reports had warned him that the Dominion would seek revenge. He had expected it. He had prepared for it. On Earth, new ships were being built in every shipyard. Soldiers were being trained by the thousands. Weapons that had only existed as designs were now becoming reality. Humanity was not going to be caught off guard. Ambassador Shin Yunji was sent to establish relations with other civilizations. She traveled from world to world, carrying a simple message. Earth does not seek an empire, she told them. We do not want to conquer. We do not want to control. But we will always stand with those who face injustice. If you are threatened, call for us. If you are suffering, reach out to us. We will answer. Some civilizations laughed at her. Some ignored her. But others listened. The Valhari, of course, pledged eternal friendship. The small colonies on the edge of Dominion space, who had lived in fear for generations, began to hope that maybe, just maybe, they did not have to be afraid anymore. On the Taiguk, Captain Jiwoo oversaw repairs and prepared for the next mission. Commander Minho was still recovering, but he had already started complaining about being stuck in bed. Some things never changed. Lieutenant Taiwu had been promoted and given his own squadron. The young pilot, who had flown into the heart of an enemy ship, was now a hero across human space. But when reporters asked him how he felt, he just shrugged. I did what had to be done, he said. Anyone would have done the same. The reporters did not understand. But Jiwoo did. That was what made humans different. They did not see their actions as special. To them, helping others, fighting for others, dying for others. It was simply what you did when you had the chance to make a difference. Sergeant Hana returned to Earth with the Valhari child she had found in the library. The child had no family left. So Hannah did what she had done her whole life. She protected those who needed protection. She adopted the child and gave it a new home. In the monitoring station in Seoul, Kim Yuna returned to work. The night shift was quiet again. Her coffee was cold again. But now, every time she listened to the static of deep space, she listened with hope. Somewhere out there, someone might be calling for help. And Earth would answer. Always. The Dominion war fleet was gathering. The greatest battle in human history was coming. Earth would face an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds. An enemy that knew no mercy and showed no kindness. But humanity was ready. They had shown the galaxy who they were. They had proven that compassion and strength could exist together. They had demonstrated that there was still good in the universe, even in the darkness between stars. Admiral Park stood on the observation deck of the Seoul's Pride and looked out at the stars. His fleet was growing larger every day. His soldiers were more determined than ever. The Dominion thought they were coming to destroy humanity. They were wrong. They were coming to learn a lesson that humanity had known for 10,000 years. When you threaten the innocent, someone will stand against you. When you prey upon the weak, someone will fight for them. When you believe that cruelty is strength, someone will prove you wrong. Earth had answered a call for help. Now Earth would answer a call for war, and the galaxy would never be the same.